Highgate Hill is a bustling suburb located in the heart of Brisbane, Queensland, Australia. With a population of over 6,000 residents, it's a vibrant and diverse community that boasts a mix of old and new architecture, from traditional Queenslander homes to modern apartment complexes. The landscape is hilly and offers breathtaking views of the Brisbane River and the surrounding cityscape. The area is known for its leafy streets, parks, and gardens, making it a popular destination for families and nature lovers. However, as the case of the McCulkin family shows, even a bright and busy city like Brisbane can have a dark underbelly. Despite the beauty and charm of Highgate Hill, the case of the McCulkin family serves as a stark reminder that evil can strike anywhere, at any time. Barbara McCulkin, born in 1940 in New South Wales, was a vibrant and resilient woman who faced life's challenges head-on. In June 1960, Barbara married Billy McCulkin, a small-time crook and debt collector. They had two daughters, Leanne and Vicky. Despite the hardships that came with Billy's unpredictable lifestyle, Barbara remained steadfast in her commitment to her family. She navigated the complexities of their relationship with unwavering strength and grace. Despite growing up in a difficult era, Barbara always kept her head held high and worked tirelessly to provide for her two daughters. She was a woman of many talents, from cooking and sewing to providing an education for her children. She made sure they were well-fed, well-clothed, and well-educated. Barbara truly was the epitome of a great mother. She often worked long hours at a milk bar, serving customers with a smile despite the exhaustion that she felt. Meanwhile, Billy's criminal activities only continued to escalate, causing Barbara more stress and worry. She tried her best to shield her daughters from their father's dangerous associates and activities, but it was a constant battle. Billy was hardly ever home, and when he was often in a foul mood, causing tension in the household. Despite this, Barbara never gave up on her husband and tried her best to keep the family together. Barbara didn't have it easy. Living in a city like Brisbane in the 1970s, which was plagued with kidnappings, murders, and drug overdoses, made life even harder for her. According to Peter Campbell, a close friend of Barbara, she was always trying to get a better job. She just lived for the kids and did a great job at that. She did a great job as a mom. Peter's stepdaughter often had sleepovers at the McCulkin house with Leanne and Vicky, who attended the same school, Uranga State School. As time went on, the financial pressure only mounted, and Barbara struggled to make ends meet, and the darkness of Billy's criminal activities eventually caught up to the family. Billy the Mouse McCulkin was a notorious figure in Brisbane's underworld during the 1970s. Born in Queensland on March 15, 1940, Billy was a small, wiry man with a cunning mind and a quick temper. He was known to be a debt collector, getting money from the bookies and massage parlors, and was willing to do whatever it took to make a quick buck. Despite his family responsibilities, Billy's criminal activities continued to escalate, and he became more deeply involved with the Clockwork Orange gang. Billy was determined to move up in the underworld and become a powerful figure. He was known to be violent and unpredictable, and his involvement with the gang only made him more dangerous. The Clockwork Orange Gang was a notorious group of thugs in the criminal underworld of Brisbane in the 1970s. Named after the famous book and movie, they were a group of young men who believed in living fast and making easy money. Along with Billy McCulkin, the gang consisted of Vincent O'Dempsey, Peter Hall, and Gary Shorty Dubois, among others. They were known to target clubs and businesses, demanding protection money in exchange for keeping them safe from harm. The gang had a reputation for using violence and intimidation to get what they wanted, and they were not afraid to use extreme measures to achieve their goals. Gangs would often target clubs because they knew they would get protection money. It was a simple equation: pay up, or your club would get bombed. One of the clubs they targeted was the Whiskey A Go-Go. On the night of March 8, 1973, the Whiskey A Go-Go Club was bursting with life as Brisbaneites, business people, and even police officers all gathered inside to enjoy the vibrant atmosphere and loud music. But as the night wore on, things took a sinister turn. At precisely 2:10 a.m., 2 drums of diesel fuel were brutally thrown into the foyer of the club, shattering the peaceful atmosphere with a loud bang. Within moments, the drums were ignited by a lit torch that was thrown through the open door. The burning diesel fuel spread quickly and sent a plume of carbon monoxide up to the club's main room on the first floor. The heat was intense, and the thick smoke made it difficult to see. The stairs were smeared with large quantities of grease, making it impossible for the patrons to escape. The door of the fire escape was also greased, which made it slippery and challenging to open. As the fire raged on, panic-stricken patrons tried to flee the building, but the flames had already blocked their way. The heat and smoke became unbearable, and 15 people lost their lives, including waitresses, musicians, and even an off-duty police officer. The tragedy shocked the city, and a circular plaque, ringed with the names of the 15 dead, still sits outside the Amelia Street doorway in Fortitude Valley, serving as a stark reminder of the horrific events that occurred that fateful night. About 100 patrons, bar staff, and entertainers had been inside the club at the time of ignition. Many had to escape by jumping from broken windows onto an awning and dropping 15 feet to the ground. As the investigation into the fire began, police quickly identified 2 prime suspects, John Andrew Stewart and James Richard Finch. They were charged and eventually convicted of the bombing, but many believed they were framed, and an inquest that could have widened the investigation was stopped after they were charged, even though it was clear that others were involved. The Whiskey A Go-Go fire was a tragedy that shook the city of Brisbane to its core. The night of the Whiskey A Go-Go fire, the flames didn't just engulf the club, but they also cast a dark shadow over Barbara McCulkin's heart. She had overheard the Clockwork Orange gang discussing their plans to bomb nightclubs, including the Whiskey A Go-Go, during one of their boozy meetings at Billy's home. Little did she know that her husband was deeply involved with the gang, and his actions would soon have devastating consequences. Barbara discussed this with John Ryan, a friend and security guard at the Whiskey A Go-Go, who agreed to help her disappear and reveal all the secrets of the infamous Clockwork Orange gang. The plan was to document everything on camera and recordings, and bring justice to the victim of the gang's ruthless activities. But as the night went on, John received no call. Barbara had put the plan on hold to let her daughters Leanne and Vicky attend a birthday party. The night of January 16, 1974, was filled with anticipation and fear as John Ryan, the security guard at the Whiskey A Go-Go Club, waited anxiously for Barbara McCulkin's call. Meanwhile, in the streets of Brisbane, the McCulkin family's fate was already sealed. That evening, her daughters Vicky and Leanne went to Junine's 10th birthday party across the street, while Barbara was alone at home. Neighborhood friends Janet and Junine Gayton saw Vince and Shorty, also known as Vincent O'Dempsey and Gary Dubois, members of the Clockwork Orange gang, with Mrs. McCulkin at their Highgate Hill house, along with an orange Valiant Charger parked out the front. Dubois later drove the Charger to Peter Hall's house in Chermside, where he confessed that he and O'Dempsey were on the piss at the McCulkins' house, and he was going back for more. As the night went on, Leanne left her home from the birthday party alone at 8:30 p.m. A neighbor watched her as she entered the house. 2 hours later, around 10:15 p.m., Vicky returned home as well. But this was the last time anyone ever saw the McCalkin family alive. On January 18, 1974, the eerie emptiness of the McCalkins' home was the first sign that something was amiss. Billy McCalkin, Barbara's estranged husband, who had been involved with another woman, arrived to find the house abandoned. The sewing table held a dress mid-stitch. Barbara's purse was perched on the fridge, and the cats were locked away in the bathroom. The family had vanished without a trace. Detective Sergeant Virginia Gray revealed that Billy immediately suspected his criminal acquaintances, Shorty and Vince, and confronted them with the information he had gathered from one of the girls at the birthday party. But the suspects fled town within days of the confrontation, going into hiding. Despite being prime suspects, it took until April 2, 1980 for the duo to be charged with 3 counts of murder. However, in 1981, the case was dropped for lack of sufficient evidence, and the 2 men walked free. For the next 34 years, the case remained unsolved, until in 2014, when new evidence emerged following the reopening of the case that year. Apparently, the Queensland Police Cold Case Unit got a tip-off that hinted that O'Dempsey and Dubois might have confessed their involvement in the murder to trusted criminal associates. Detective Sergeant Virginia Gray and Detective Inspector Mick Dowie reopened the cold case of the McCalkin murders in 2014. They had little to go with until the tip-off was made. With that new information, Queensland Crime and Corruption Commission, known as the CCC, called in Peter Hall, a former criminal associate of Shorty Dubois. The CCC is an independent Queensland government entity which has the power to investigate major crimes and corruption by using coercive powers to force witnesses to give evidence, denying them the right to silence. During the interrogation, Peter Hall admitted involvement in several crimes of the past. Hall admitted to the firebombing of the Torino's nightclub in February 1973, an unsolved arson in which no one was killed. He admitted to doing break-ins as a petty criminal with his fellow Clockwork Orange gang members Gary Shorty Dubois, Tommy Hamilton, and Keith Meredith. However, when the CCC pressed on, he denied any knowledge of any role that Shorty Dubois may have played in the abduction and murder of Barbara McCalkin and her daughters. What was significant about that denial was that Hall was not actually being specifically questioned at that point about the McCalkin disappearance. Also, during the interrogation, Hall let slip a comment. He said, "Shorty went missing the following day." This comment caught the attention of Detective Sergeant Virginia Gray, who realized the significance of what Hall had inadvertently revealed when she listened back to a recording of his CCC interrogation a week later. She believed that Hall was flagging that he knew Shorty Dubois had gone missing after one unspecified but crucially important day. The detectives then realized that Peter might know what happened to the McCalkin family, but didn't want to talk due to the criminal code of silence. Who would blame him? From his experience as a petty criminal in his youth, Hall was bitterly skeptical of police. He believed they were the enemy and was well aware of corrupt police officers from the bad old days of the Queensland Police Force, who were systematically bribed by organized criminals. So Detective Virginia Gray and Mick Dowie had to win Hall's confidence and trust. And slowly, but surely, they did. Peter Hall decided to break the code of silence and reveal what he was told by Dubois just 2 days after the murders. He had kept this secret for 40 years, but he decided to publicly admit his criminal past and reveal what he knew. According to Hall's confession, Barbara McCalkin and her 2 daughters were abducted from their home on January 16, 1974. They were taken to a remote bushland area near Warwick, 2 hours southwest of Brisbane, where O'Dempsey separated Barbara from her children and strangled her to death. Dubois then assaulted at least one of the girls, and both children were murdered and buried with their mother. However, their bodies were never found. Gary Dubois allegedly recounted that they had waited for the sun to rise so they could see what they were doing, and as the light filtered through the trees, they dug holes to bury the bodies. But it was the sight of the lifeless bodies lying there in the morning sunlight that unnerved him the most. In the aftermath of the unspeakable horror, he couldn't get out of the place fast enough. Hall describes Dubois as a victim of circumstance, forced to comply with O'Dempsey's orders or face certain death himself. Anyone who got in his way at the time would have been killed, Shorty included, Hall recalls. It was a terrifying reality that Dubois could not escape, and one that ultimately led to the deaths of 3 innocent lives. Peter Hall recalled that Dubois had invited him to come with them to the McCulkin house that night of the disappearance, promising him that he would have the chance to make love. Peter Hall's decision to decline Gary Dubois' invitation to join him and Vincent O'Dempsey at the McCulkin home was perhaps the difference between life and death. The promise of making love was merely a ploy to entice Hall into joining the depraved duo on their mission to murder the family. In retrospect, it was a bullet that Hall dodged, both literally and figuratively. As Hall reflected on that fateful night, he shudders at the thought of what could have happened had he gone along with Dubois. He wondered if he, too, would have been coerced into committing heinous acts of rape and murder against innocent children. The haunting possibility that he could have been complicit in the horrific crimes still sends shivers down his spine. Whether I'd have had the courage to try and change the outcome, I don't know, Hall muses. But if I had, I think I would have probably been still up there now. The weight of the words and the seriousness of the situation are not lost on Hall. He understands the gravity of what could have transpired had he made a different decision that night. Looking back, Hall is grateful to have escaped the clutches of the Clockwork Orange gang and to have lived to tell the tale. He knows that the McCulkin family was not so fortunate, and their tragic fate serves as a stark reminder of the evils that lurk in the shadows of society. Hall's confession was a significant breakthrough in the case, and Vincent O'Dempsey and Dubois were convicted and sentenced to life in prison on June 1, 2017. Hall's decision to break the code of silence and his willingness to testify in court played a crucial role in securing the convictions. His wife's tears during the interview were likely a combination of relief and stress because her husband was taking a significant risk to bear witness against O'Dempsey and Dubois. Warren McDonald was mentored by Vincent O'Dempsey for a period of 20 years in criminal activities. Warren's father had a history of criminal association with Vincent, and because of that connection, Vincent took Warren under his guidance and mentorship. They had worked together on several criminal ventures, including overseeing a massive illegal cannabis crop in 1997, which McDonald still vividly remembered. During the drive back to Warwick from the crop site, McDonald remembered a conversation they were having concerning a particularly difficult worker who was causing problems at the crop site. O'Dempsey then said, "Oh, you need a notch on your gun." McDonald didn't understand what he meant by that statement, so he asked what it meant, to which O'Dempsey replied that he needed to kill to gain respect. The stunned McDonald let O'Dempsey keep on talking. That was when O'Dempsey raised the McCulkin murders. Just came straight away with it, McDonald remembers. O'Dempsey right there admitted to the McCulkin murders, saying that Shorty was nothing but an assailant and that they would never catch him as they would never find the bodies. Warren McDonald's decision to come forward and testify against Vince O'Dempsey was not an easy one, as he knew the risk involved in speaking out against him. He had kept his secret about O'Dempsey to himself for the last 20 years. but he eventually decided to testify after the police had gathered enough evidence to put him in jail for years for the drug crop. McDonald's testimony was crucial in securing O'Dempsey's conviction for the McCulkin murders. However, McDonald's decision to testify also put him and his family in danger. O'Dempsey had allegedly planned his murder from his jail cell, and McDonald knew that O'Dempsey had a history of making witnesses disappear. McDonald feared for his life and that of his family, saying, "I would be murdered. My family would be murdered. They're trying to murder me now." Despite the risks, McDonald was determined to get the monkey off his back and bring O'Dempsey to justice. He scoffed at suggestions that he had fabricated the allegations to get off the hook, saying that the stress was unbearable and he could be murdered any day. O'Dempsey had once given him sage advice, saying, "If you want to live a long and healthy life, never repeat a word that'll get yourself or anyone else into trouble," which now seemed ironic given O'Dempsey's situation. Peter Hall's partner at the time, Carolyn Scully, had a daughter named Carrie Ann, who was born on July 14, 1981. Carrie Ann recalls Vincent being around when she was growing up a little bit at her mother's house. Vincent and her mother were seeing each other. Carrie Ann grew up and became a heroin addict. In the middle of 2011, Carrie Ann had young children and needed financial help. She called Vincent, who was then living in Warwick. Vincent gave her some money. Carrie Ann and her children then began living with Vincent in his house at Warwick. According to Carrie, Vincent had lots of books. He bragged to her that he had been in lots of newspapers and that he had been written about in a book. He gave Carrie Ann $20 to go and buy a copy of a book called Shotgun and Standover. While lying on the bed, Vincent told her he'll show her what the book said about it. According to her, he was really proud of it. O'Dempsey showed her a picture in the book of himself walking from court with a leather jacket slung over his shoulder and bragged about the McCulkin murders. "I'm good for it, but they'll never get me for it," O'Dempsey said. A little later he said to her, "I did it, and they still couldn't get me for it." Miss Scully left the relationship the next day and remained in fear of the man who she later told police was an intelligent serial killer who covered his tracks. "He takes you in the middle of the night like an angel, and you're gone for good," Miss Scully told a committee hearing in November 2015. The memory of that night still haunted her, the image of O'Dempsey's face etched into her mind. She knew then that he was not just an ordinary man, but a predator, a monster, hiding in plain sight. Carrie Scully went into hiding, living in fear for her life, constantly looking over her shoulder, waiting for the day when O'Dempsey would come for her. But she knew that she had made the right decision, that it was better to live in fear than to become another victim of a man who had no remorse for his heinous crimes. In the final stretch of the trial, a crucial witness emerged, adding weight to the evidence against O'Dempsey. The witness, a remand prisoner whose identity remains undisclosed, had jotted down O'Dempsey's confession on scraps of paper and crossword puzzles. The prisoner testified that O'Dempsey had said, "She had to be dealt with," referring to Barbara McCulkin. He had also tried to distance himself from the murders, claiming that he had never laid a hand on the children and that Shorty had committed the gruesome acts. The informant also revealed that O'Dempsey had approached him after being granted bail, with an attempt to prevent the testimony of Warren McDonald and Carrie Scully in court. The informant detailed how O'Dempsey had shared information about McDonald's daily routine, including the road he took and the roadside diner where he stopped for breakfast. The revelations left no doubt about O'Dempsey's involvement in the McCulkin case and his intention to silence witnesses. With the testimony of the final witness, the case against O'Dempsey and Dubois was complete, and the verdict seemed imminent. Vincent O'Dempsey was a 78-year-old man born in 1937, who was currently on trial for murder in the Brisbane Supreme Court. His great-grandfather, James O'Dempsey, came to Warwick from Ireland in the mid-1850s and started a family that would ultimately produce a murderer. He sits upright and attentive in the dock, wearing a hearing aid to listen to the proceedings. But those who know him well say that he has always been lacking in empathy and feeling, as he was diagnosed as a psychopath in his youth. O'Dempsey's large meaty hands and coal-black eyes unnerve those who have encountered him. He has never shown any remorse for his actions, and if anything, seems proud of his violent past. His former girlfriend, Carrie Ann Scully, testified in court that he boasted to her about his involvement in the McCulkin murders, and even confessed to being responsible for a total of 33 murders. That would make him one of Australia's worst mass murderers, although he has not been charged for any other murders. There is still speculation that O'Dempsey was involved in the Whiskey A Go Go nightclub bombing that left 15 people dead. O'Dempsey had co-opted Shorty Dubois and his Clockwork Orange gang cronies to firebomb Torino's nightclub 11 days earlier, which could offer a possible motive for the McCulkin murders. It is believed that the reason why Barbara McCulkin and her daughters were killed was because they feared she might reveal something she knew about the bombing of the Whiskey A Go Go. The speculation all throughout the murder trial was that O'Dempsey and others were concerned they might be incriminated in the whiskey murders because of their involvement in the Torino arson 11 days earlier. And for that reason, Barbara had to die. Detective Sergeant Virginia Gray told 60 Minutes that she believed Barbara knew enough to get herself into trouble. The children, unfortunately, would have placed O'Dempsey and Dubois at the scene of their mother's abduction that night, so it is suggested that is why they had to die as well. But some people, like Peter Hall, believe that O'Dempsey enjoyed killing for the sake of it. He believed that O'Dempsey went there that night for even baser reasons. Regardless of his motivations, O'Dempsey is a psychopath, gangster, and convicted murderer. After more than half a century, he is only now coming into focus as Australia's worst serial killer. The trial of the McCulkin murders was held in the Supreme Court in Brisbane, where Justice Peter Applegarth presided over the sentencing hearing on May 23, 2017. The court heard that modern laws allowing the court to set a parole eligibility date could not be applied retrospectively. Justice Applegarth addressed both offenders, Vincent O'Dempsey and Gary Dubois, telling them that they were cold-blooded, heartless killers who showed no remorse and would likely die in jail. He said that O'Dempsey had boasted about killing the McCulkins and getting away with it, and that he was a hardened killer and criminal with no conscience. Judge Applegarth stated that O'Dempsey had murdered a defenseless woman and was a child killer who was beyond redemption. He also said that Dubois had no conscience and was a cowardly old man who had aided O'Dempsey and continued to do so out of fear. Justice Applegarth further explained that O'Dempsey used intimidation and traded on his reputation as a mad dog. He said that Dubois had obeyed O'Dempsey and aided in killing and assaulting the girls like a coward. However, when Dubois began talking over the sentence, Justice Applegarth told him to shut up. When he did not comply, Dubois was removed from the courtroom. The judge went on to say that the last hours of Barbara, Vicky, and Leanne's lives must have been terrifying. He said that Dubois was a coward, but O'Dempsey had been the prime offender. Justice Applegarth also explained that it was clear that Barbara McCulkin knew enough about each of the pair's roles in the nightclub bombings at the time for them to want to silence her. He said that Dubois and O'Dempsey had escaped justice for decades, and luck was on their side. So was the fear they installed in others. Justice Applegarth explained that the dedication of police, the testimony of dozens of witnesses, and the conscience and courage of some key witnesses at each of the trials had ensured justice at last. He told the killers that they could have no expectation of early parole. If they maintained their silence over where the bodies were buried, they could not reasonably expect to ever be granted parole. Earlier in the hearing, Justice Applegarth had allowed O'Dempsey to read a handwritten note in the court. In the note, the killer said that he had been wrongly convicted on false testimony and never had any reason to harm the McCulkins. Dubois also requested to speak, but had not prepared anything in writing, so he was not able to address the court directly. Outside court, O'Dempsey's lawyer Terry O'Gorman said that his client was innocent and had been convicted on unfair testimony, including statements from Billy McCulkin, who had since died. However, O'Gorman acknowledged the grief and angst that the McCulkin family had been through. He extended his sympathies to the family while repeating what O'Dempsey had said, that he was innocent of these charges. In the end, Justice Applegarth sentenced both men to life in prison. He told them that they would never be released unless they revealed the location of the McCulkin family's bodies. The judge's words echoed through the courtroom, leaving a lasting impression on all of those present. The story of Barbara McCulkin was not just a tale of tragedy and murder, but also one of secrets and hidden truths. Vincent O'Dempsey may have thought he knew everything about Barbara that fateful night, but there was one thing he didn't know: her daughter. As a young girl of 17 years old, living in Queensland, Australia, Barbara had fallen pregnant, but the family of the boy wanted nothing to do with her. Neither did her parents want her to keep the baby or marry the father. And in those days, tragically, there was no option for an unmarried mother, no domestic support benefits, and nothing but shame and social pressure for having a baby out of wedlock. So she gave her beautiful newborn baby girl away for adoption in 1957. The adoptive parents renamed the baby Joycelyn, and she grew up unaware of her biological family until she discovered the adoption papers hidden in her adoptive mother's bedroom's cupboard in 1972 when she was 14 years old. Joycelyn was devastated when she finally learned the truth about her birth mother, Barbara, and her two half-sisters who were murdered. She had always felt loved by her adoptive family, but the loss of her biological family was a heavy burden to bear. "You can't help but feel so sad about the whole scenario," Joycelyn lamented. "They didn't do anything wrong. Just because she had some information, they didn't deserve to die." Joycelyn often wondered if her mother had been allowed to keep her, would she have ever found herself married to the detestable criminal Billy McCulkin. She also wondered if she had been with her sisters that fateful night in January 1974, would she too have been taken for a one-way drive by Vincent O'Dempsey. During the O'Dempsey murder trial, Joycelyn sat in the public gallery, studying his unemotional visage as his dreadful crimes were detailed. She had hoped to see some remorse or acknowledgement of the pain he had caused her family, but he showed none. Joycelyn was philosophical about not letting O'Dempsey's crimes against her family get under her skin, but she wanted justice to be done. "They're evil men, and they don't deserve to be walking around free," she said. One mystery that remains unsolved is where Barbara and her children's bodies are buried. Joycelyn hopes that the DNA sample taken from her as Barbara's closest living relative may one day be used to confirm their location. "For 45 years, I've kept all that to myself," Joycelyn said, her voice trembling. "My mother gave me life, so it was something that I could do for her in death, and just a way of saying thank you to her." Joycelyn implores Shorty Dubois, who surely knows where the bodies are buried, to finally do the right thing. "Could you at least have a shred of decency, and at least tell us where you buried them, so we can have closure for everybody in the family?" However, it is unlikely that Vincent O'Dempsey will ever reveal what he knows. He probably relishes the pain his final foul secret still causes. The story of Barbara McCulkin is a tragic one, but Joycelyn's hope for justice and closure continues to shine through. She may never know all the answers, but she will always honor her mother's memory and fight for the truth. On the morning of June 7th, 2021, a 74-year-old man was found lying lifeless at 4:30 a.m. in his single cell at the Maryborough Correctional Centre in Queensland, Australia. The man was later identified as Gary Reginald Dubois, who had been convicted of the manslaughter of Barbara McCulkin and the rape and murders of her two daughters, Vicky and Leanne, in 1974. Staff and paramedics tried to revive him, but he was declared dead at 5:20 a.m. Dubois had been jailed for life in 2017, alongside co-accused Vince O'Dempsey. Both men were described as cold-blooded, heartless killers who showed no remorse for their crimes. Justice Peter Applegarth, who presided over the case, said that the last hours of the victims' lives must have been terrifying. Dubois was described as callous and a coward, while O'Dempsey was deemed the main offender. Dubois' death occurred just as he was due to testify this month at a reopened coronial inquest into the 1973 Whiskey A Go-Go nightclub bombing. The death was a significant blow to the investigation, as Dubois' testimony could have shed light on the incident and helped to bring those responsible to justice. On May 16, 2022, Vincent O'Dempsey, a convicted triple murderer, testified at a coronial inquest regarding the 1973 firebombing of Brisbane's Whiskey A Go-Go nightclub. O'Dempsey had been implicated in the attack and was asked tough questions about his involvement. He refused to take an oath or affirmation and expressed defiance throughout the proceedings. He denied any involvement in the arson and claimed not to know James Richard Finch, one of the convicted men. When questioned about the disappearance and murders of Barbara McCulkin and her daughters, he evaded the inquiries. Despite O'Dempsey's denials, there was a sense that he was withholding the complete truth. The inquest aimed to uncover further details about the attack and whether others had knowledge of it. With the conclusion of the inquest approaching, the mystery surrounding the Whiskey A Go-Go attack remained unresolved. The family of Mrs. McCulkin and her two daughters expressed relief that justice had finally been served with the guilty verdict of O'Dempsey. However, they also acknowledged that closure cannot be fully achieved until they locate the remains of their loved ones. Brian Ogden, Mrs. McCulkin's nephew, spoke on behalf of the family outside court and said, "The verdict received today has been a long time coming. For 43 years, our families have longed for information and justice." Nestled in the heart of the Lone Star State, Beaumont, Texas, this vibrant city, with its own unique character, sits along the banks of the mighty Neches River. Home to a diverse population, Beaumont pulsates with energy and intrigue. With a population of over 118,000 residents, Beaumont strikes a balance between a close-knit community and the buzz of urban life. Its streets weave a tapestry of history, as evidenced by the stately architecture that adorns its neighborhoods. The city's roots run deep, with a rich cultural heritage that resonates in its art, music, and culinary offerings. But this city was also the stage for the chilling tale of Mary Edwards.
Saratoga is a city in Wood County, Wisconsin, located in Silicon Valley in southeastern Bay Area. Saratoga is an affluent residential community known for its wineries, restaurants, and attractions like Villa Montalvo, Mountain Winery, and Haycone Gardens. It not only offers inviting neighborhoods and friendly communities, but also a booming industry and incredible growth opportunities. Saratoga is home to several unique neighborhoods, each with its own character and charm. Brookview and Pride's Crossing in the north, Blue Hills and Greenbrier in the southwest, and Congress Springs in the southwestern corner of Saratoga. But amidst the beauty and charm of such vibrant communities, a sinister crime was committed in 1984. A 73-year-old woman was found brutally murdered in her own home. leaving investigators with little to no substantial evidence. Eleanor Roberts of Nakusa, Wood County, Wisconsin, was born on April 10, 1911. She was a beloved mother, wife, and grandmother. She had a son named Marshall Roberts who lived close to her in Saratoga. Known for her kind-hearted nature and always going out of her way to make sure everyone around her feels loved and cared for, she was a beloved member of the Saratoga community that she was residing in 1984. Sadly, when she was least expecting it, tragedy was waiting for her just around the corner. The events that unfolded in the Roberts household on that fateful day on November 27, 1984, was nothing short of chilling. It was after Eleanor failed to show up to meet her brother at an automobile dealership where she was looking to buy a car that her brother went to her home on South Hollywood Road in Saratoga. But when Eleanor didn't answer the door, he called her son Marshall Roberts. As Marshall made his way to his mother's Saratoga home, little did he know that he was about to be confronted with a scene of horror that would stay with him for the rest of his life. Marshall knew there was a key to his mother's house kept at a hidden place outdoors. As soon as he unlocked the door and entered the home, he immediately noticed that something was amiss. The air was heavy, the house was eerily quiet. But it wasn't until he made his way to the bathroom that he realized the magnitude of what had happened. As he opened the bathroom door, Marshall was hit with a sight that he could never have prepared for. His mother, Eleanor Roberts, lay motionless on the floor in a pool of her own blood. Her head was covered with a bath mat, which Marshall immediately pulled back, only to be confronted with the unthinkable. His mother's lifeless body, with signs of violent trauma. In that moment, Marshall knew that he was looking at a crime scene, one that would forever change the course of his life. Marshall immediately dialed 911 and reported that he had found his mother dead in her own home and gave the address to the police. Within minutes, officers were dispatched to the location. After he dialed 911, in a short while the place was packed with Wood County Sheriff's Department detectives and forensic team personnel. The forensic pathologist who did the autopsy determined that she died from a combination of blunt force trauma and numerous stab wounds, which based on the shape and other factors he believed came from being stabbed with scissors. There were no natural causes related to her death, and the death was ruled a homicide, as the sheriff's office report stated. Someone had stabbed and beaten Eleanor to death. She suffered broken ribs and a punctured heart and lungs, the wounds being consistent with being stabbed with a pair of scissors. The only items authorities found missing upon further investigation of the home were a pair of scissors, a knife, and a telephone, according to the warrant. As the investigation into the tragic loss of an innocent life unfolded, the killers seemed to have left no trace behind, leaving the authorities with nothing to go on. But just when all hope seemed lost, a glimmer of light appeared in the form of a palm print that was found in the bathroom where Eleanor's body was found. Investigators found the knife that same day on Hillcrest Avenue in Saratoga, not far from Robert's South Hollywood Road home. They found the scissors the next day, about 1.25 miles away, and the telephone 4 months later in March 1985 in the Wisconsin River, about 2.5 miles away. On the day of Eleanor's death, an officer found a ski mask on the branch of a tree across from Eleanor's home, according to the criminal complaint. It appeared to have been thrown there. The mask, along with the knife, the scissors, and the phone were found in places along the same route. The investigators theorized that the potential suspect lived along this route as well. Upon further investigation, the route on which the evidence was found led the investigators to John A. Sarver, an employee who worked at a store where Eleanor had purchased a lawnmower from. On December 3, 1984, Sarver was first interviewed. He told investigators the day before Eleanor's death he was with another witness shooting pool at Evergreen Lanes. Investigators learned that Eleanor came into contact with Sarver when she bought a lawnmower from Competition Cycle where he worked during the summer of 1984. The lawnmower required repairs covered by warranty, and Sarver had performed the repairs when Eleanor made the complaint. On May 1, 1985, Sarver was interviewed again, and he confirmed his last contact with Eleanor would have been in the summer of 1984 when he went to repair the lawnmower she had bought from his employer. When the palm print that was found in the bathroom was identified and confirmed as Sarver's, he was interviewed again. And again, he told the investigators that his last contact with her was late summer, early fall 1984, which was consistent with other records investigators had. But Sarver said he never was inside her home. So, how did his handprint get there? The other witness Sarver claimed to have been with at the time of the murders was also interviewed. And while the witness could not specifically remember everything that night, he said he didn't remember ever shooting pool with Sarver. Investigators said he gave several different alibis in that interview, and upon further interrogation of the witnesses Sarver had claimed to be with, none of them could be confirmed. In fact, another witness he said that he was with told investigators they were by themselves that evening. During various interviews, Sarver gave different explanations of where he was when Eleanor was killed. Investigators were never able to confirm any of his explanations or alibis. Another witness around the time of Eleanor's death told investigators Sarver was having financial difficulties and that he had borrowed $2,000 from him shortly after the murder. The witness said he was never paid back. In 2005, a confidential informant at the time told investigators that 17 years earlier, Sarver admitted to killing a woman with a karate chop to her neck, which matched Eleanor's injuries according to the complaint. 4 small claims cases were filed against Sarver since 2006 for non-payment of bills, and one similar case was filed 3 months after he was arrested. Eventually, though it seemed like all the evidence pointed to Sarver, the case went cold. Retired Wood County Sheriff's Office Lieutenant Robert Lewandowski, who was one of the first investigators on the case, said the case often stalled through the years. Former Sheriff's investigator Jay Schroeder spent hours organizing years' worth of information. There often were disagreements between investigators and prosecutors about whether the case was ready to be reopened. Lewandowski said for decades it sat cold and a solution seemed impossibly far. Nearly 3 decades after the crime, in May 2013, investigators said they got a search warrant to obtain DNA from John A. Sarver, whom authorities had regarded as a prime suspect in the case since Eleanor's tragic demise. Jerome C. Lippert, a retired business executive who lives in the Pittsville area and studies local history and events, wrote an article that was published in the Wisconsin Rapids Tribune on December 16, 2016, which made a shocking claim. Not all police officers involved in the case deserve praise. What unfolded was a story within the story. During the late 1980s, John Sarver served as a citizen informant for the Wood County Drug Enforcement Unit under the supervision of Detective Brian Illingworth, also known as Big Al in the field. Illingworth, who was later retired as a detective and former Wood County Sheriff, testified during the trial. Despite attempting to present a favorable view of his work with Sarver, evidence presented during the trial suggested that the former sheriff had become too close to his informant. For instance, Sarver was not fingerprinted upon starting his work, a standard procedure that was only carried out 2 years later by another officer. Additionally, Illingworth attended Sarver's wedding, an uncommon practice, and there was a question during the trial about Sarver becoming heavily intoxicated while under Illingworth's supervision, which is clearly against departmental policy. In 1988, during the investigation into Eleanor Roberts' murder, an intriguing meeting took place at a cabin in Adams County, where Sarver and Illingworth were purportedly alone before other law enforcement officers arrived to question Sarver. The details of that conversation held during this private interaction, if any, have never been disclosed. Furthermore, Lippert was aware of another crucial piece of information that never came to light during the trial. In the 1990s, a member of the Roberts family approached then-Sheriff Illingworth with a Reader's Digest article that discussed advances in DNA testing, wondering if it could help with the case. Shockingly, the sheriff glanced at the family member and callously retorted, "The suspect is a friend of mine," before tossing the magazine back at them. This is an utterly unacceptable response for any law enforcement officer to give to a grieving family member seeking justice for their loved one. It can now be openly stated that Not all police officers involved in this case deserve praise. This attitude or conflict could have contributed to the delay in justice for this case. Furthermore, there was a peculiar incident that occurred towards the end of Sheriff Illingworth's career in Wood County, which may have some correlation. It is possible that some long-term residents in the area remember that in 1997, Illingworth was admitted to Rock County Institution, allegedly due to depression and struggles with alcohol and drug abuse. This information was initially kept from the public, but eventually came to light, and as a result, Illingworth decided not to seek re-election in 1998. He retired from law enforcement without much fanfare the following year. In that article, Lippert also noted that there had been a chief suspect. At the time, he was not at liberty to name the individual for obvious reasons, but that person was Mr. Sarver. Lippert also indicated that the whole story was not being told. Indeed, the trial proved that his assertion was also correct. He asked for renewed interest in this case, which led the investigators to work on this case determined to find the killer of Eleanor Roberts. The Wood County Sheriff's Officer Heiser added, "The first thing we did was look at all the evidence. Looked at the 6,000 pages of reports that were done over the years, and then we met with all the investigators who had worked the case." The accused, Sarver, was 21 when Eleanor died, worked at a business that sold her a lawnmower, and had gone to service it at her home, according to the warrant. At first, he told authorities he was never inside Roberts' home, but investigators later found his palm print on the bathroom counter. In April 2020, the same witness told investigators that Sarver admitted to going into Eleanor's home to rob her. He said he was surprised she was home and beat her to death, by accident, according to the complaint. After nearly 36 years, developments were made in the gruesome Central Wisconsin murder case. One of the key witnesses who wanted to remain anonymous finally came forward in 2020, after almost 4 decades of suppressing his memories, primarily due to fear. He was the one who confirmed at trial that there were in fact 3 people at the crime scene in 1984. During his testimony, Mr. Sarver was referred to as a scary dude due to his connections with the police, which made him afraid to speak out and even fear for his safety. In 2020, he overcame his fear of John Sarver and decided to come forward with his painful memories, realizing that it was better to confront them before he died. His testimony was truly gripping. The courtroom was so silent that one could have heard a pin drop. As per the complaint, the witness told the investigators that he had heard that Sarver had confessed to breaking into Eleanor's house through the rear entrance with the intention of robbing her and accidentally killing her. The criminal complaint states that the department persisted in submitting samples for DNA testing from 1988 until 2020, utilizing increasingly sophisticated testing techniques as they became available. Unfortunately, due to the global pandemic, the case experienced a setback after charges were pressed in 2020. The Wood County Sheriff's Office and Wisconsin Department of Justice, DOJ, announced that on August 27, 2020, the prime suspect of this case, John A. Sarver, from Port Edwards, Wisconsin, had been arrested in connection to the first-degree murder in the death of 73-year-old Eleanor Roberts. If convicted, Sarver, who had been in jail pending a $1 million cash bond, faces a maximum sentence of life in prison. Sarver had a hearing and requested Wood County Circuit Judge Nicholas Brazeau Jr. delay the trial, scheduled to start March 14, 2022. Robert's son and Assistant Wisconsin Attorney General Annie Jay, a special prosecutor in the case, both asked Brazeau to keep the trial scheduled for March 14th through 18th, according to online court records. Sarver's attorney, Jeremy Meyer O'Day, said he and attorney Taylor Hart needed more time to interview witnesses and finish their investigation. Brazeau ordered the trial be reset and scheduled for a hearing for updates on March 15, 2022. And in November 2022, John Sarver was found guilty at trial of killing Eleanor Roberts. Because Sarver committed the crime after November 3, 1983, but before August 31, 1995, the judge has no say over his parole eligibility. Sarver will have to serve 13 years and 4 months before he can go before a parole board. An inmate must satisfy 5 requirements before the parole commissioner may recommend a grant to the parole chair. The 5 requirements are good conduct, competition of programming, sufficient reduction in risk to the public upon release, sufficient time served so as not to depreciate the seriousness of the offense, and a completed and approved release plan as determined by request of an investigation by the commission. He has had the opportunity to live a full life, to raise a family that maybe he shouldn't have had the opportunity to do. It's a good thing that he did it because there are good people in this world, but there isn't nothing in my mind or heart that makes me think that he should have opportunities to get out there, said Judge Brazeau. Time between the murder and his arrest in 2020 was his parole, according to the reports. The arrest came as the result of a joint investigation between the Sheriff's Department and the State Department of Justice, which will prosecute the case, Wood County Sheriff Sean Becker said. It was a brutal homicide that has gone unsolved for way too long, Becker said during a news conference outside the Wood County Courthouse. There were times that people were frustrated, but we never gave up. The prosecutors from the State of Wisconsin Department of Justice, DOJ, did an excellent job of methodically building their case. The lead defense attorney did his job in fine fashion as well, working to cast doubt whenever he could. Ultimately, however, he was not successful, because from my perspective, the facts were just too much to overcome, Wood County Sheriff Sean Becker said. November 2, 2022, in Branch 2 Wood County Court, a guilty verdict was finally rendered in the case. John A. Sarver was convicted of this heinous crime, and the case finally came to its conclusion. On January 23, 2023, justice was finally served in the case when John A. Sarver was sentenced for the first-degree murder of 73-year-old Eleanor Roberts. The resolution is a significant achievement and testament to law enforcement officials' dedication and persistence, providing closure to the victim's family and the community, and reminding us that justice can be served regardless of time passed.
This case takes us to Sanford, one of the cities of the U.S. state of Florida. It is situated in the central part of Florida. Sanford, the historic waterfront gateway city, is located near the mouth of the St. Johns River on the southern edge of Lake Monroe. Thousands of years before the city was founded, Native Americans inhabited the region. Since then, a myriad of diverse people settled down in the Sanford region. The historic district has grown in recent years, drawing a wide range of restaurants and breweries, and providing a charming low-key nightlife to the city. The Army, Air Force, and Naval Training Center in Orlando brought plenty of people to reside in Sanford for comfort. It has a tight-knit community where people help one another, even though it has its share of local crime. Pamela Kahanis's murder was one such crime that Sanford witnessed in 1984. Born on August 24, 1958, in Stillwater, Washington County, Minnesota, Pamela Jane Kahanis was the second youngest of 8 siblings. Her parents, Louis and Alice Kahanis, ran a dairy farm together to raise their 8 children. Pamela was raised in a close-knit, loving family in Stillwater. Later, she relocated to St. Paul so she could work for a publishing house. By the time she was 25, she wanted to explore more. She applied for the Navy, and fortunately, she got the offer from the Navy to travel the globe. Pamela gladly accepted the offer and decided to report to boot camp in Orlando with her parents' approval. It was because of her background on the family farm. She was confident and well prepared for military duty. In order to travel across the nation to Florida, Pamela Kahanis bid farewell to her 7 brothers and sisters in May 1984. She was excited about the boot camp and was indeed thriving in her training. Finally, she successfully made it through 2 months and graduated from the Naval Training Center of Orlando. Before reporting for her duty to serve the nation, she wanted to return home one more time to spend time with her loving family in Minnesota. But things didn't go as planned. On August 3, 1984, Pamela graduated from her training in the Orlando Naval Training Center after 2 months of hard work and consistency. The next morning, Pamela went to the Fashion Square Mall in Orlando. She bought a few things and spent a good time strolling around the area. She bought something in the late afternoon at a Kmart in Orlando. Between 6 p.m. and 7:30 p.m., she was spotted at the Navy Training Center with an unidentified man, and then in Main Street. The two were strolling in the same area. Pamela and the unknown man were later spotted at the Mariners Club, a pub and club on the premise of the Navy Training Center. She was supposedly also seen after 8 p.m. at an ABC liquor store in Sanford. She was quite excited about the new life she was stepping into. However, fate had other plans for her. On the morning of August 5, 1984, a car was passing by the Riverview area near Sanford. It was around 7 a.m., and the driver was enjoying the calmness around when his eyes landed on something unusual. It was a woman, lying unconscious in the front yard of an abandoned house in the same area. The driver stopped his car and took a closer look at the woman. It didn't take him long to understand that what he thought to be an unconscious woman laying on a lawn was actually deceased. He immediately called 911 and reported everything that he had discovered. Seminole County Police rushed to the crime scene. The police confirmed that it was the body of 25-year-old Pamela Cahanes. She was found almost naked except for a pair of white underwear. Nobody knew how she got to be a half-hour north of the Orlando Naval Training Facility. Was she taken to that place, or did she go there willingly? Based on the immediate physical evidence on her body, police reported that she had been beaten and strangled. They were also able to deduce that she was not killed at the location where her body was found. Rather, she was just dumped there from a vehicle with all of her belongings. A generic receipt found at the crime site indicated that a transaction was made by Pamela at a Chinese restaurant around 1 a.m., which confirmed that she was still alive at 1 a.m. on August 5, 1984. Pamela had her whole life in front of her, but there she was, lying dead cold in the front yard of an abandoned house. A young lady who dreamt of serving the nation by fighting for it lost the battle of life to some vicious criminal. Was the criminal someone she already knew, or was it some stranger who resided in the local area? What could be the motive behind this murder? The investigation started immediately after finding her body, and the detectives firmly believed that the suspect was related to the training base. They found bloodstains on her fingernails, and it was reported in the autopsy that she tried fighting back for 8 to 10 minutes, but then the murderer overpowered her and was successful in killing her. In fact, the police also retrieved bodily fluid samples from her underwear, which police believed to be a significant piece of evidence in the case. Other than that, police were able to get a detailed timeline of her movements and places where she had been seen between August 3, 1984, the day of graduation, and August 5, 1984, the day her body was found, in case any clues could lead the investigators to the suspect. It helped investigators with two things. First, it arranged the series of events that took place before her murder in chronological order. And second, it provided them with a suspect who Pamela was hanging out with when she was last seen at Mariners Club on the night of August 4, 1984. Investigators were unable to identify her close friends because the majority of Pamela's classmates had already departed Orlando. Meanwhile, Pamela's family members back in Minnesota could not understand why somebody would want to harm her. Detectives of Seminole County, Florida, put a lot of effort into the case, but no arrests were ever made. Slowly, and unfortunately due to the lack of evidence, the case went cold. However, in the late 1980s, in a demoralizing turn of events, the family received a tip that the suspect might have been captured, but it was revealed that the tip was inaccurate. One of Pamela's older siblings, Eileen Kahanis Bergman, recalled that the incident led her and her family to lose faith in the investigation. Justice seemed like a dream for the Kahanis family at that time. Investigators were as frustrated as the family, if not more. They had similar questions in their minds. How long would it take to capture the perpetrator? If the killer is still roaming around freely, how many more lives, like Pamela's, are at stake? The case was reopened in 1995 when the investigators were confident that they had access to new and better technology. They carried out forensic tests on Pamela's underwear from a new perspective. With the DNA taken from under her fingernails and the bodily fluid that was found on the underwear, forensic experts were able to create a DNA profile of the suspect. Although they did succeed in creating the DNA profile of the suspect, they did not manage to identify him. Without any constructive lead to move on, detectives were standing at the same point they started the investigation. Slowly, the case turned cold again, for almost another 2 decades. The Kahanis family tried to move on, but couldn't, as Pamela's death and not finding the person behind it weighed way more than they thought. It wasn't until 2018 that investigators had the technology that had the potential to provide a more constructive result. Thus, they decided to give this case another shot and try their luck again. Based on the extracted DNA and the suspect profiling performed in the 1990s, they were able to build a family tree after uploading the data of the extracted DNA to a public database and analyzing the matches. This led them to 59-year-old Thomas Lewis Garner, who was a dental hygienist practicing in Jacksonville in 2018. Born on January 16, 1960, Thomas Lewis Garner grew up in Glenwood, Alabama, USA. In his long career, he had the phase of serving the nation when he joined the military and training centers of the naval recruitment facilities. In 1984, he was training at Orlando Naval Training Center. Soon after, he decided to leave the military and practiced as an independent dental hygienist. In February 2019, a surveillance team watching Garner observed him throwing out a bag of garbage at his Jacksonville residence. They retrieved a cigarette butt, a cotton swab, and a piece of used dental floss from the bag. These items were sent for DNA analysis. Soon after, the results were back. DNA from the bodily fluid on Pamela's underwear matched Garner's DNA. The Seminole County Sheriff's Department detective texted the Kahanis family on Sunday, March 10, 2019, to set up a face-to-face meeting in Minnesota, where 5 of the siblings still resided. The family was expecting an informal meeting that would include some case updates, as the detectives had not explained the reasons before the meeting. The siblings gathered at Bergman's home, and 4 days later, on March 14, 2019, Thursday morning, it was the time for the meeting. When the investigators entered the room and announced that she wanted to show them a video, the siblings were sure it was some update on the case of their deceased sister. The footage showed Thomas being taken into custody on March 13, 2019, 1 day before the meeting. Thomas Garner was unknown to the Kahanis family. However, his existence now was a constant reminder to them that he was the one who took away the life of their loving sister Pam. Eileen recalled the moment investigators informed them about the arrest. She remarked that the siblings never really knew that the case would be solved, so once they were informed about the arrest, they were overjoyed and overwhelmed with a sense of relief. It was after the Kahanis family was informed, the news of the arrest was made public. Sheriff Dennis M. Lemma of Seminole County remarked that the man probably thought he was getting away with murder. Investigators were now able to retrieve information about his background, which suggested that Thomas was stationed at the Naval Training Facility in Orlando at the same time as Pamela Kahanis. After his arrest, he denied knowing Pamela in person and remarked that he did not understand how he was charged with her murder. Within 2 months of his arrest, Thomas additionally turned up as a potential DNA match in a Honolulu homicide from September 1982. An Atlanta-based employee of Delta Airlines named Kathy Hicks vanished while traveling to Hawaii. Thomas's DNA, according to authorities, matched evidence found at the spot where Kathy Hicks's body was found on a grassy slope along Nauanu Poly Drive close to a ravine. According to reports, Kathy was beaten to death and strangled, just like Pamela. The detectives even found out that he was in Honolulu when Kathy was visiting a softball tournament with her Delta Airlines co-workers and later turned up dead. Thomas Lewis Garner was not charged with killing Kathy Hicks because the case's evidence had not yet been thoroughly examined. He was taken up for his trial at the Seminole County Courthouse in Sanford on May 6, 2021. As the 4-day trial commenced, Pamela's family assembled to seek justice for their beloved Pam. During the trial, Anna Valentini, assistant state attorney, said in a statement that for the sake of defending her nation, Pamela Kahanis joined the Navy. Instead, she was forced to defend herself against Thomas Garner for more than 8 minutes before succumbing to his attacks. Thomas maintained his innocence throughout his trial, admitting that he was pretty promiscuous at the time, but denying that he killed her. He also stated that if he had had a casual fling with Pamela, he probably wouldn't remember. Although the motive behind the murder was unknown, and Thomas kept on pleading not guilty to the charges against him, the matching DNA of his bodily fluid found in the underwear of Pamela and the DNA profile of Thomas told a different story. The fact that they were in the same naval training facility in Orlando in the same period was significant enough for the 12-member jury of the Seminole County Courthouse to give away the verdict of this case. The charges against him were proved in favor of the prosecution. After 2 hours of review at the Seminole County Courthouse in Sanford, Thomas Garner of Jacksonville was found guilty by a jury, according to Todd Brown, a spokesperson for the Seminole Brevard State Attorney Phil Archer. Circuit Judge Marlene Alva gave Thomas Garner a life sentence in prison. 2 hours after the procedure with the jury began on the Pamela Kahanis murder case, Eileen said the moment the decision was read was bittersweet. She knew that her young sister Pamela wouldn't ever return, but they still had to seek justice and let Pamela's soul rest in peace. She acknowledged the loss that was around the joy after the verdict was made against Thomas Garner. There was some relaxation, but there was no sense of closure. "It'll stay up there for a while," Eileen said. "Our parents are no longer with us, so it would have been lovely to be able to share it with them and let them appreciate this moment." However, the siblings acknowledged the happiness that the news brought for the rest of them. Nevertheless, the family had some painful recollections after hearing the judgment. Jerry Kahanis, Pamela's elder brother, stated it brought them right back to that same day when they heard the bad news. In Lake Elmo, near Highway 36, a striking new billboard appeared at Eileen's family's company, Country Sun Farm and Greenhouse, after the arrest. It was erected by Eileen's son, who was only 11 years old when his aunt tragically passed away. The billboard was put up to ensure that the entire community could bear witness to justice. Over the years, the case remained a point of deep interest for neighbors, friends, and Pamela's former classmates from Stillwater High, who have steadfastly maintained their involvement.